Welcome back to Minecraft Through the Ages. And every time I've said that in the past, it's almost been a bit of a formality, but for a once-in-a-lifetime reveal, welcome to the great Through the Ages Polyworld. So maybe the music is a bit much, but that's pretty breathtaking. But before I can explain how I made this beautiful creation of a world, we have to update to the next Minecraft version. Welcome to Minecraft Classic version 0.0.14a_03. Now, if you know a lot about old Minecraft, hearing that might have had alarms going off in your head. After all, this version is a real version of Minecraft released May 27th, 2009, which used to be playable back in the day, but nowadays, this version is lost aside from some screenshots. This version that I'm showing off to you today is an extremely faithful remake of the version made by Method. These remakes are not public, and this footage is not to be passed off as legitimate for obvious reasons. Of course, huge thanks goes out to Method. His channel and current project links can be found in the description below, and I highly recommend you go check them out. With all that being said, Classic version 14a adds a whole lot to Minecraft at the time, nearly doubling the block count. We now, alongside stone, dirt, grass, cobblestone, wood, and saplings, have access to the new logs, leaves, sand, and gravel blocks to place, as well as having iron, gold, and coal ore spawn in caves. With these new ore blocks come some new interesting properties. We're not yet able to place them in our world, but generate they do. They spawn in ore veins, recognizable from newer versions, but these ore veins are absolutely massive, spanning often from cave system to cave system, with no end in sight. They also happen to spawn in at any Y level, which is a bit of a discontinued feature. Come to think of it, every single one of these new blocks has a unique feature about them that shouldn't go without mentioning. Firstly, we have leaves, who stand out obviously for being the first full, solid, semi-transparent block, as water and lava previously were semi-transparent but were rendered on a separate layer. These leaves are the first real stand-ins we have for any sort of vegetation as well as windows or glass as well. Alongside these leaves came logs, which are a little less obvious in their intrigue, but are still very interesting as well. They are the second ever blocks to be dual textured, having both a side and a face texture. The first block to have this property being the grass block. Sand and gravel are also both extremely intriguing additions to the game. These blocks are both affected by gravity, but it isn't nearly as smooth as in modern versions of Minecraft. This new so-called gravitational pull is not entirely ironed out, as the placement can be likened almost to a teleport, as well as the fact that sand and gravel do not yet interact with fluids, simply standing on top of them. All while I've been talking, I've been building a little house using our new block palette, and I think this has some serious potential for a build I've been cooking up for our main town. Getting back to some features, I mentioned some of the new blocks added in this version, but it has a lot more than just that going for it. Of course, the terrain generator had to be changed to accommodate the new trees, gravel, and sand. These changes namely include the addition of tree clusters forming sorts of new forests, new sand beaches, as well as new huge gravel beaches that are only a part of the terrain generator for one update. The trees in 0.0.14a_3 update generate with full cubes at the top, and in the 0.0.14a_08 update the trees have a plus shape at the top. I've decided to alter some of the trees in this 14a_08 world to reflect this, just for some fun historical accuracy. Grass can now generate on and below sea level, where it previously couldn't. Along with this change came changes to the uniform dirt layer added last episode. I say changes, but really it just got removed. Liquids have also seen great improvements to their flow as well as function, now flowing much more smoothly as well as flowing from the border where it didn't before. This helps a ton in selling the illusion of the world border not just being a fake infinite ocean that we talked a lot about last episode. There are still some more changes and additions, but for a minute here I'd just like to talk about the new render distance fog. In the game for quite a while now has been the ability to change the render distance, despite the settings menu not even yet existing in the game. You could do this simply by pressing F, wherein the chunks loaded would slowly shrink inwards, but it was done a little bit awkwardly. But with the 14a update came the addition of the fog. This fog was originally blue, and shrunk in alongside the chunks of the world to try and ease the eyesore of the lowering render distance in these earlier versions. Sadly, the blue fog is only a part of these lost versions that we actually don't have access to. And I say sadly because this actually looks really great. I think I actually like the blue fog more than I like the fog that we ended up with in the final version of the game. But as much as I might like this blue fog, it does have some problems. Namely, the fog only gets applied on lit surfaces, and the blocks in the shade appear as they normally would. This leads to some very odd interactions, and the fog just not looking quite right when viewed under certain circumstances. The fog also interacts with the liquid layer of rendering quite poorly, with it becoming non-functional once the layer is fully submerged under the water/lava. While that was a lot to cover with this frankly super interesting version of Minecraft very rarely shown off and seen by the public eye, I'm not done just yet. There is another version lost to time before even this version, known simply as Classic version 0.0.14a-dev3. This update is also known as the Color and Vertex Offset version. Just quickly, I don't actually have access to this version, so all the footage will be taken from Method's Craftology series. This update is pretty well known for what I hope are obvious reasons. This change came about after Notch was talking to a user in the IRC text channel, adding variation to the game for realism would be to its benefit. Very luckily, I might add, this change didn't stick around. I don't even really have that much to say about this update. I just feel as though not mentioning it is a disservice as it's just so weird and cursed. Alright. To finish off the segment, I'd just like to give some huge thanks again to Method, the creator of the remakes, as we update to the next version of Minecraft, Classic version 0.0.14a_08. Alright, here we are. This version, unlike the last, is fully available to the public and still has many of the amazing features first seen in 14a. I actually skipped over a few of the changes and additions to the game in the remake to be talked about here. The first and most important of these should be incredibly obvious and was teased at the beginning of the video. The great Polyworld has arrived. This is all thanks to the addition of different world sizes. Previously, when a world was generated in the game, with or without pressing the recently implemented Generate New button, the worlds generated would span 512 by 512 blocks around and 64 blocks high. In 0.0.13a, it was seen that new world sizes were being tested by the dev build. This update was the update that added them officially. Now when generating new worlds, we are given the option of a world size. Small is brand new this update, with it being 128 by 64 by 128 blocks. This may seem a little tiny and almost silly, but this was actually an extremely welcome update at the time. As we've got to remember, this was all the way back in May of 2009. At the time, many computers struggled to even run Minecraft, so the new smaller worlds and render distance toggles really helped to alleviate these issues. Then, there is the previous default and old size of 256 by 64 by 256. This is the size of all our previous worlds, and the size we will continue to generate new ones in for new terrain generators for our Polyworld. Finally, returning from the classic 13a dev build is the large world size of 512 by 64 by 512. This world that we saw at the beginning, and I've been referring to as my Through the Ages Polyworld, is actually sized at 712 by 64 by 512. This is all thanks to the fact that the game will actually recognize custom world sizes, so long as it is outlined in the level.dat name and is in a square shape. But now, what does the Polyworld part of that name really mean? Alright. So, a while ago now, Nolitrum posted a video series and explanation video of his Polyworld way of classifying worlds. To put it simply, when a world goes through multiple terrain generators and has changes to the world that don't match the seed, like chunk walls and borders, or half-generated trees or structures, your world becomes a polyworld. This theory, I think, rings especially true in classic Minecraft, where we have used multiple methods to combine all of our previous worlds in this series into one big polyworld. As I previously said, our Polyworld is as of yet sitting at 768 by 64 by 512, with room for one more generator and world before we have to expand. And with all that fun theory and explanation out of the way, there are still some changes and additions that I want to mention. Now that we're on the subject of worlds, entities actually save to these worlds, so something like a house with a Steven is now going to actually save to the level. This does, however, come with a bit of a caveat, as there is a limit now to the amount of Steves you can have in a single world, so pulling off stunts like this is no longer going to be possible. There are also a lot of positive changes to the way that the mouse works that really helps with accessibility. Firstly, you can now use the scroll wheel to switch between the blocks you have selected. With our newfound selection, this is quite a welcome change, as there are so many blocks to scroll through. You can also now simply just hold down the mouse button to continuously break blocks. Finally, for the mouse changes, and the change I appreciate the most, is the addition of pick block. Now, when you mouse over a block and middle mouse click, the block is automatically selected. I really didn't think I would use this as much as I have, but man does it come in handy. Sadly, however, it doesn't work on the unusable blocks like grass, iron, gold, or coal ore, and/or lava and water. All in all, though, this is all amazing stuff. There are also a few new bugs, like the white overlay becoming invisible, as well as a few new bug fixes. I believe that this is the update that finally gets rid of the block and block bug. Thank God. Alright, all throughout this I'm sure you've seen me patching and pathing up the world and really making it feel a lot more connected and complete. After all that's done, I think it's finally time to build a new building in our town. With the palette of the last build that we did in mind, I think a town hall is in order. And how good does this look? Honestly, I'm really quite proud of it, but it turned into a bit more of a mansion than a town hall. I also decided to make a sort of hedge maze out the back with the new leaves, and really love how that ended up coming out. It also really ended up connecting the two worlds together in a way that I wasn't expecting, but looks really good. Just while we're here, and as a bit of a sad omission, I've cheated a little bit when converting this first world. As at the time, the world didn't even save the block IDs, as I said in that first video, so if I were to add it to the world with no changes, the world would actually default to all being stone. To remedy this just for the looks of the Polyworld, I used MC Edit to restore the original palette of the world. So other than that pretty minor change that is entirely visual, the Polyworld is a simple cut and paste of all the different worlds into one. If you want a tutorial on how to do that, feel free to contact me or Zelinator, as he's the one who ended up actually creating the guide that I used to make this Polyworld, and will continue to use to make it in the future. To close out this admittedly longer than I expected video, I want to talk a bit about the textures in this update. First off, and most simply, you may have noticed this whole time that there were now clouds in the sky. This is actually brand new for the 14A versions, and I've gotta say, it adds a lot more to the game than you would even really think. This effect is achieved using a simple 2D cloud texture map that scrolls across the sky. And if you go all the way up to build height, you can even see that the clouds are actually 2D. You may have also noticed if you were paying some serious attention that the cobblestone and planks texture have changed, but you would need to have a really astute eye, as the change is quite small. There is also something really interesting hiding in the newly changed terrain.png file where all the textures are stored. There is this white texture that remains completely unused and is removed shortly after this version. This texture has been the subject of much discussion in the Minecraft community, with many saying it represents an early version of how snow or wool may have looked. My personal interpretation based on the surroundings of this release is that it's actually a texture that was intended for the clouds but wasn't used for the final product. The main reason I believe that it would have been the clouds is just due to the fact that this was the update that clouds were actually added to the game, and it just seems like too much of a coincidence for it to be completely unrelated. It is, however, also very possible that it was intended to be the texture for the snow block that Notch was discussing on his Tumblr page. This is what that would have looked like. Man, this also makes a lot of sense. I don't even know what it was supposed to be, honestly. But regardless, I think this was a really cool texture that's sadly lost to time. And that's officially all for Classic version 14A. There was a lot to cover in this video, so any feedback on this kind of longer style would be greatly appreciated. Regardless, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.